Good morning, students. I'm HP Shrimal, Assistant Professor of English, Government College, Mangalana. Today we are going to take up the next topic, that is antithesis. That's a literary device, and under this topic, we will discuss definition of antithesis, examples, the basic difference between paradox and antithesis. So let's begin. First of all, we take up the definition of an antithesis. Antithesis is a contrast or opposition in meaning emphasized by a parallel in grammatical structure. You see the two basic things in this definition. The first one, it's the contrast or opposition in meaning. That is to say, two contrary meanings are expressed in antithesis. And for it, we use a single sentence. In a sentence, two opposite meanings or contrary ideas are expressed. Is that clear? The first part of the definition tells us that two contrary ideas or opposite meanings are expressed through antithesis. And the second part is that this contrariness or opposite ideas are emphasized by a parallel in grammatical structure. That is really important. A parallel in grammatical structure. For the expression of these two opposite ideas or meanings, we use parallel grammatical structure. Is that right? Let's see how. And for it, we take up a few examples. Marriage has many pains, but celibacy has no pleasures. You can see this on the screen. Marriage has many pains, but celibacy has no pleasures. Is that right? And for it, you see that this is a sentence. And this sentence is two parts. The first one is marriage has many pains, and the second part is celibacy has no pleasures. And these two clauses are joined by a conjunction, that is but. But in the first part, you are talking about marriage, and in the second part, you are talking about celibacy. The two opposite ideas are expressed in the same sentence. Is that clear? In the first part, in the first clause you are talking about marriage, and in the second clause you are talking about celibacy. Celibacy means bachelorhood. Marriage has many pains. You know, this is a famous line by Dr. Samuel Johnson. Marriage has many pains. There are so many problems that results from marriage. But celibacy has no pleasures. But there is no pleasure in remaining a bachelor. Is that right? In the first clause, you are talking about marriage. In the second clause, you are talking about celibacy. In the first clause, you are talking about the pains of marriage, and in the second clause, you are talking about the pleasures of celibacy. You see the opposite or contrary ideas: marriage, celibacy, pains, pleasures. Was that right? Therefore, in this sentence, you find two opposite ideas are expressed in one in the same sentence. Now we come to the second thing, that is a parallel grammatical structure. Now you see the parallel grammatical structure in this sentence. Marriage has many pains. Marriage is the subject, has verb, many pains, object. Is that right? Celibacy is the subject, has verb, no pleasures, object. Now see, the grammatical structure of both clauses is SVO, SVO. Is that right? Therefore, it has a parallel grammatical structure. We have used a parallel grammatical structure to emphasize the opposite meanings or contrary ideas. Is that okay? That's why it's an example of antithesis. I hope now you understand what is an antithesis and how you will analyze it to find it out. Now let us take up the second example. Speech is silver, but silence is golden. Is that okay? Now in the first clause we are talking about speech. In the second clause we are talking about silence. Contrary ideas. Is that okay? Opposite meaning. Now let's analyze the grammatical structure. Speech is subject, is verb, silver complement. The clause analysis of the first clause is subject, verb, and complement. And now we come to the second clause. Silence is subject, is were golden complement. Therefore, the same grammatical structure to express opposite ideas. Speech is silver, but silence is golden. And that's why it's an example of antithesis. Is it okay? Are you enjoying it? Let's begin with the third example. Now see, man proposes, God disposes. In the first clause, we are talking about man. In the second clause, we are talking about God. Opposite. In the first clause, we are talking about proposes. And the second clause, we are talking about disposes, opposite ideas. Is that right? And therefore, and these opposite ideas are in one and the same sentence. And now we see the parallel grammatical structure. Main, subject, proposes, verb. The analysis of the first clause is subject, verb. And the clause analysis of the second clause, God, subject, disposes, verb. Subject, verb, subject, verb. Is that right? That's why it's a parallel grammatical structure, and we have used a parallel grammatical structure to emphasize two opposite ideas, and therefore it's an example of antithesis. Is that right? Now we take up the fourth example. This has been asked in grade 1 exam conducted by RPSC. To err is human, to forgive divine. To err is human, to forgive divine. Now see, in the first clause you are talking about committing errors. In the second clause you are talking about forgiveness. Two opposite ideas, committing errors, forgiveness. In the first clause you are talking about human, and in the second clause you are talking about something divine, opposite or contrary ideas. Is that okay? Opposite meanings or contrary ideas are expressed in one in the same sentence, right? Now we come to the clause analysis. To err is human. The clause analysis of this clause is subject, verb, complement. Is that right? Subject, verb, complement. And the clause analysis of the second clause, to forgive, subject, and after to forgive, the be verb is understood, and therefore verb is understood, subject, verb, and divine is complement. The same grammatical structure, subject, verb, complement, subject, verb, complement. And that's why it's an example of antithesis. Let's take up one more example. God made the country and man made the town. God made the country, man made the town. You see, in the first clause, we are talking about God, and in the second clause, we are talking about a human being. Contrary ideas, opposite meaning. The country means countryside, rural areas, right? And the town. The country, town means urban area. God made the country. God created only countryside, only the countryside. But it is the human beings who created or made towns. Therefore, we find that opposite meaning or contrary ideas are expressed in the same sentence. Now we see the clause analysis. God is the subject, made verb, the country object, subject, verb, object. Now we see the clause analysis of the second clause, man subject, made verb, and the town object. The same grammatical structure, and therefore we say that we have used a parallel grammatical structure to emphasize two opposite meanings. Is that okay? That's why it's an example of antithesis. I hope now you understand what an antithesis is, and you will be able to find it out. Now we see the difference between paradox and antithesis, because both these two things are in your on your syllabus. Paradox. What's a paradox? It's a statement that seems self-contradictory. A self-contradictory statement that turns out to have a valid meaning on second thoughts. That is a paradox. And what is an antithesis? It's a contrast or opposition in meaning emphasized by a parallel grammatical structure. Right? In a paradox, we don't have a parallel grammatical structure. But for an antithesis, there is, a parallel grammatical structure is a must. Example, war is peace. There is no parallel grammatical structure in war is peace. But this is a sentence which seems self-contradictory on its face, because war cannot be peace. war and peace are quite contrary, but there is no parallel structure. Therefore, we do not consider it as an antithesis. But when you say man proposes, God disposes, there is a parallel structure, opposite meanings, and therefore it's an example of antithesis. I hope now you understand the difference between paradox and antithesis. Thank you. Keep watching. We shall take up the next topic tomorrow.